Alrighty guys, section 1 of chapter 3. Chapter 3, again, like I said earlier, continues with this quadratic idea, which we covered in 2.1, or all of chapter 2 I should say. Our goals today are to do this, to solve quadratic equations by graphing, to solve quadratic equations by factoring, and to solve quadratic equations by using square roots. Okay, now this whole idea of solving quadratics, that's what the whole chapter is about. Okay, we'll spend 6 sections on solving quadratics and what does that mean. Okay, so when we say solve quadratics, okay, there's a couple meanings to that. If we're going to solve quadratics by graphing, I just want you to put find the x-intercepts. That's essentially what that means. Okay, we're going to find where the graph, excuse me, crosses the x-axis. Okay, I'll come back to second objective here in a second. So solve by graphing. Here's what we need to do. Step 1 is we need to graph the quadratic. That's what we worked on all last chapter. And then we are going to find the x-intercepts. What does x-intercept mean? Liam.
The graph crosses the x-axis.
Great. It's where the graph crosses the x-axis. That's all we're doing. Okay? Here we go. I'm going to show you guys how to do this in our calculator. So here we go. We're going to go to y equals and type in x squared minus x, whoopsie, minus 6, and hit zoom 6. Okay, we want to know where the graph crosses the x-axis, don't we? Okay, now where do you think it looks to be crossing the x-axis at? Jake Lucas, where do you think it looks to be?
3.
Do you guys agree with 3 there? And where else, Tristan?
-6.
It doesn't look at negative 6 would be way over here. X-axis. X, not Y. -2. I think -2 and 3. Okay, how could we verify to be 100% sure that's the case? Absolutely, Brooklyn. We're going to go to our tables. Hit second table. And if what are we looking for on our table? 0 where though? On the y. Would you guys agree that if something crosses the x-axis, the y coordinate at the x-axis is 0? Absolutely. So I'm looking to see where it's 0. And I think we would agree there that at, did I already pass it? At +3 and at -2, that's where it crosses the x-axis. So I'm just going to graph that here. -2, +3, That's really what I'm looking for. I need those two numbers. X equals -2, X equals 3. Those are my answers.
Yeah, do you care where it's at on the Y?
Say that again?
Do you care where it's at on the Y?
On the Y, what do you mean?
No, Y-axis. Because it's -6.
Sure. And the answer is, so basically what you're saying is, do you care how accurately you graph it? And we know that my y-intercept is going to be -6. And to be honest with you, when we're looking for solving, when it says solve the quadratic, I want to know where it crosses the x-axis. That's really all I care about. Okay, that's really all I care about. Now, if it said, hey, find the minimum and something like that, well, then we're going to have to get a little bit more accurate. Questions there? Okay. Can I just type that in my calculator just like that?
No.
What are we going to have to do here, Rachel?
I think we're gonna have to move the 4x on the other side.
Okay, could we move 4x to the left? Would that be okay? Yeah, it would. Guys, anytime it's possible, I would prefer having our a value be positive.
Oh.
So I would, if it was me, I would move everything over to the right, knowing that now if I added 2x squared on both sides, I would now have a positive a value, and the graph would open up. That's just me, and that's a personal preference. You don't have to do it that way. All right, so I'm going to add 2 then. And so then my quadratic becomes 2x squared plus 4x plus 2, and now that's equal to 0. Okay, so let's go ahead and plug that in. Guys, hey, can I show you something? Everyone eyes and ears up here, please. If I just go and just start typing in, it's just going to start erasing what I already have typed in, isn't it? Do you agree there? So if I hit 2 right now, it's going to replace the x and put 2 squared. Okay? But if you want to insert something, you can hit the second button and then hit that delete button. That's the second, and then above the delete in blue letters it says INS for insert. So hit second insert, and now it's blinking, meaning I can hit a 2 there. And now it's slid it over, so I don't know, just help save some time. So 2x squared plus, same thing here, I don't want to hit, I'm going to hit second insert and hit 4. Plus 2. So you guys looks like? What's that, Marcus?
Yeah.
Okay. You're talking about your table? Let's look at our table, guys. We're looking for where's the y0, and where is that? That's at -1. Now if I go back to my graph, does it look like it? What's happening here? Should we zoom in on that? Okay, here's another thing you can do. Guys, watch me. You hit zoom, and then you can hit enter on Z box. Okay, here's what this does. If I hit enter on Z box, now you've got this blinking light at the origin. Do you guys see that? Now you can use your arrows and slide over, and basically what we're going to do, we're going to pick where we want to zoom in on it. Okay, so if I want to start, you're basically making a box, and you're going to click enter on the corner. So that's where I want to start, so I'm going to hit enter, and then I'm going to make my box over where I want to zoom in on, and hit enter, and it'll zoom in right on that box. So what's happening at -1? Yeah, it's just touching it at -1, and then it's going back up. So that, you know, I put here where the graph crosses the x-axis. Well, crossing or touching. So here our answer would be -1. Okay, x is going to equal -1. Okay, I'm going to show you one more thing. Okay, yeah, I'll do that later. We'll do that next class. Questions here. If it says solve a quadratic by graphing, what are we looking for?
X-intercept.
The x-intercept. Simple as that. Graph area calculator, go to the table, find them out. Okay? Actually, I better show you this. Let's say, yeah. I'll see how long I can get by without doing that. Okay, here we go. The next section here. We're going to be solving quadratics by square roots. Okay, so we're going to be using square roots to solve quadratics. Now, here's our steps. The first thing is we need to solve for whatever is squared. I'll talk about that here in a second. We're going to solve for whatever's squared first. We want to get whatever's squared on one side of the equation. Okay? Then we're going to square root both sides. Okay? And then in parentheses, I want you to put don't forget plus or minus. Again, we'll talk that through here in a second. Okay, and then lastly, we need to simplify the radical like we did in our bell ringer. Okay, simplify it, and then in parentheses just put if needed. Sometimes we won't need to do that. Okay, so here we go. It says 5x squared equals 80. How are we going to solve for x there? Well, going into step 1, it says, hey, solve for, meaning get whatever is squared on one side of the equation. Okay, well, x is squared. Would you guys agree with me there?
Yeah.
Okay, so we need to get rid of the 5. How am I going to do that? Divide by 5 on both sides. So x squared equals 80 divided by 5 is 16. Okay, now, second step is to square root both sides. So the square and the square root will cancel, so I'm left with x. Okay, now the square root of 16 is 4. Now here's the rule. If you put the square root sign in yourself into the problem, then it has to be plus or minus. And here's what that means. Because what's negative 4 times negative 4? It's positive 16. So the square root of 16 really is plus or minus 4. It could be either or. So really now we're getting 2 answers. So instead of just getting 1 answer, we could potentially get 2. Well, guys, when we graph those, in example 1, weren't we getting maybe 2 answers? Yeah. Okay, x equals positive negative 4. Questions there at all? Guys, just watch me here for a second. Y equals, it's not going to be friendly. So if I hit 5x squared, can't really do that. Here's a question. How do I put this into my graphing calculator? How do I put that in my graphing calculator?
5x squared equals 80.
What?
5x squared
But there is no equals 80. What shall we? Get them both on one side. Okay, you guys can just watch this, but if I do 5x squared, how do I get 80 to the other side? Well, I minus it, right? I can type that in my calculator now. Okay, and if I type that in, I'm going to get 5x squared minus 80, and I'm going to hit zoom 6. Where's the graph cross the x-axis at? Positive 4 and negative 4. So when we're solving by square roots, we're really finding where the graph crosses the x-axis. Okay? Finding where the graph crosses the x-axis. Questions there? Now, Rachel had a question. What is 6? Well, when I hit zoom on my calculator, the option is 6 is just our standard window. It's just to get the standard window. Is that what you asked?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. What are we going to do here? We're going to add 7 to both sides. I'm going to get x squared equals 36. Now I can square root both sides. X is going to equal, what's the square root of 36? 6. But it better be plus or minus. If we graph that thing, if we minus 27 to the other, 29, excuse me, to the other side, we graph it, where's the graph going to cross the x-axis? Positive 6 and negative 6. Okay, get into a little bit more complex one here. Actually, let's come over and do this one first. Oh man. Now we've got more than just x squared, it's x minus 4 squared. So here's our goal. We need to get rid of all the stuff that's not squared first. Okay, so that means the negative 18 and that means the 7. So which one of those am I going to do first? Hey, I'm going to add 18 to both sides. And so 7 times x minus 4 squared, that equals 28. Now, how to get rid of the 7? Divide both sides by 7, and I'm going to get x minus 4 squared, and that's going to equal 4. So essentially, we've solved for whatever's squared. It's x minus 4 squared. Okay, now we should get rid of the squared by square rooting. So I'm going to be left with x minus 4 on the left. What's the square root of 4? It's 2. We put the square root in symbol in ourselves, so it needs to be plus or minus 2. Okay, any questions there? Now at the very, very end, now that we've gotten rid of the square root, or excuse me, the squared by square rooting, now we can go ahead and add the 4 to both sides. Now here's the issue. Is that 2 or negative 2? Right there. It's both of them. Okay, so everyone wants to say it's plus or minus 6 as our answer. Well, that's not the case. Okay, so here's the rule. If you have plus or minus in there, you have to then put the number in front. So it'd be like this: x equals 4 plus or minus 2. Okay, because we're going to add 4 to both sides, but this represents two numbers. It represents positive 2 and it represents negative 2. Okay, now, what's 4 plus 2? It's 6. What's 4 minus 2? 2. So those are our two answers. Positive 6 and negative 2. Excuse me, positive 6 and positive 2.
So how do we write down my equation for plus minus plus negative? Like say plus or negative 2. We have bottom where x equals
4 plus or minus 2.
So that'd be
So this is part of the answer, but then we can simplify that to 6 and 2. Okay, questions there? Okay, what are we going to do next, or what are we going to do first over here?
divide by 9.
Divide by 9.
We're going to divide both sides by 9. So I'm going to get x minus 2, that's going to be squared, equals, golly, 40 over 9. We're going to keep that as a fraction. Okay, the days of just getting a decimal in our calculator and putting that down are slowly dwindling. Okay, now what can do, Grace? Yeah, absolutely. We're going to square root both sides. So I'm going to get x minus 2 equals plus or minus the square root of 40 over 9. Okay, that's not ideal. That's kind of ugly. Now here's when you square root a fraction, guys, you're really square rooting the numerator and square rooting the denominator. Okay? Well, what's the square root of 9? That's 3, right? So, I'm going to add 2 first. I'm going to add 2 over. I'm going to get x equals 2 plus or minus the square root of 40 over 3. Okay, now, let's look at 40. Can I simplify 40? Meaning, what's the largest perfect square on my list that's a factor of 40? 4. So, if I just kind of do a side note over here, square root of 40 is the same thing as the square root of 4 over the square root of, not over, but square root of 4 times the square root of 10, right? Well, and the square root of 4 simplifies to 2. So our final answer then should be 2 plus or minus 2 times the square root of 10 over 3. And that's our answer. Okay? Now, what is that? That's just some ugly decimal that keeps going on and never ends. Okay? We're going to write it in a way that we can actually write the whole number out with having square roots and plus or minus. Now, how many numbers are there? How many numbers does this represent? It represents 2. It represents 2 plus whatever that thing is, and 2 minus whatever that thing is. Okay, let's do this in our calculator. Just so you guys get the idea here. This thing not going to work again? Okay, guys, I'm going to do 2 times the square root of, what is it again? Of 10? I'm just doing this so you guys get the idea of what this number actually is. 2 times the square root of 10, I'm going to hit enter. I'm going to divide that thing by 3. So, 2 square root of 10 over 3 is that thing. Okay? So I need to take 2 plus this. So 2 plus whatever that number is. So there's going to be one of my answers. 4.108 something, something, something. Okay? And I need to take 2 minus that number. So, yeah, 2 minus, type that number in. That would give us our other answer. Any questions there? Where do you think the graph's going to cross the x-axis if we graph that thing?
2.
At this number?
Yeah.
And that number minus 2. So it's going to be 0.108185. Those are going to be the 2 locations. Questions there? So the next part is factoring, and we've already covered that. Yeah, we would have known it. So our steps for factoring. The first thing is this. We need to solve the equation, or I will just say get the equation equal to 0. The first thing we need to do is get it equal to 0. And the next step is to factor completely. And the last thing is to set each factor equal to 0 and solve. So here we go. Example 1, is that one already equal to 0?
Yes.
Perfect. We don't need to do any of that. Now we're going to factor. It's got 3 terms, so we're going to have to marf, right? Now there's no a value, so we could actually mini-marf. So factors of, I'm going to do 1 times 35. Well, factors of 35, that add up to 12. Factors of 35 that add up to 12. Cool? 5 and 7, you bet. So since there's an a value there, I should say the a value is 1, we can mini-marf. We don't have to factor by grouping. I'm going to say x plus 5 and x minus 7.
Why is it minus 7?
I lied. It's plus. Sorry. I made a mistake. Plus and plus. Okay, now we need to set each of these equal to 0. So x plus 5 is equal to 0, and x plus 7 is equal to 0. We're solving for x. I'm going to minus 5 on both sides, and x is going to equal negative 5. Minus 7 on both sides, x is going to equal negative 7. So I have 2 answers, negative 5 and negative 7. Where do you think the graph is going to cross the x-axis? Negative 5, negative 7. You guys are getting the hang of this thing. Now, what also this means, so we get this straight, means if I plug in negative 5 in for x there and there and do a bunch of math, I'm going to get 0 as my answer. If I plug in negative 7 for x and x, do some math, I'm going to get 0. Those are the values that get me to 0. Well, if you think about our table that we just had up before, what value were we looking for y? 0. Okay, this one's not equal to 0, is it, Tony? No, so what should we do first? How do we do that? Minus 2 over, yep. So we're going to get 3x squared minus 5x minus 2. We're going to marf. 3 times negative 2 is negative 6. Factors of negative 6 that add up to negative 5. Well, if it's negative 6, that means what has to be true? 1 positive and 1 negative, right? So what would be those factors? Negative 3 and negative 2 or negative 6? It's got to be 6 and 1, because in order to be negative 3 and negative 2, they both have to be negative. But we just said we know one has to be positive. Okay? So we're going to do negative 6 and positive 1. Now, can we mini-marf here? No, we got a long marf. 3x squared plus, I'll say minus 6x plus 1x minus 2. I think I did that right, didn't I? Split it in half, factor by grouping. What's in common between 3x squared and negative 6x? 3x, so I'm going to be left with x minus 2. What's in common here? Yeah, we're just going to factor out a 1 because we already have x minus 2. So my two factors are 3x plus 1 and x minus 2 equals 0. Now we're going to set those equal to 0. Now, can I show you guys a shortcut? You guys like shortcuts, don't you? Okay. When there's no coefficient in front of x like there is here, it's just going to be the opposite of that number. X equals 2. Okay? But when there's a coefficient in front of x like there is in the 3, we have to actually solve it out. Now here's the shortcut. We're going to do the opposite of that number, negative 1, divided by that number. Now, why does that work? Well, if I do 3x plus 1 equal to 0, I'm going to minus 1 on both sides. 3x is going to equal negative 1. Divide both sides by 3. X equals negative 1/3. You don't have to use that little shortcut that I did, Thought I'd tell you, help you out a little bit if you'd rather just solve it out. It should be positive 2 because it's going to be the opposite of that number. Because if we said x minus 2 equal to 0, add 2 to both sides, we're going to have positive 2. That make sense? Okay. And lastly here, am I going to mark this guy? No. So are we going to factor that? So I got 2 terms.
Take an X out.
Yeah. Take a GCF out. So I'm going to have x minus 8. So x times x minus 8. Now that's all the further I can factor. So now we're going to set each of them equal to 0. Guys, here's a rule of thumb. If I just have x, I need to set that equal to 0. That's going to give me an x-intercept. Okay? So x is going to equal 0 and x is going to equal 8.